undress, and breathe, Mafia boss whispered as she sobbed in his arms after escaping her ex. The lock clicked. It was the softest sound, a tiny metallic snick in the 2 o'clock in the morning silence of the apartment. But to Lena Carter, it was a gunshot. She didn't grab the laptop. She didn't grab the camera bag with her best lenses. She didn't grab the wool coat hanging by the door. Travis had bought the coat, just as he had bought the laptop, just as, she now realized, he had bought her, piece by piece, until the only parts left were the ones he allowed her to have. The realization had settled in hours ago, a cold stone in her gut while he slept, snoring softly beside her. The second bank statement, shoved in the back of his desk drawer, was the key. The declined debit card last week had been the lock. The charity accounts she'd helped him design logos for, which she now saw were just empty digital shells for money that wasn't his, were the tumblers. It was fraud, all of it. The dinners, the apartment, the praise he'd given her for her little hobby in photography, all just tools to keep her quiet, busy, and tethered. He hadn't just been controlling her. He had been using her name, her minor design skills as a cover. She slid out of the bed. She grabbed her wallet from her purse, her cash, what little was left, and her phone. Her fingers were already fumbling with the keys to her car, the ones Travis always misplaced. When the phone's screen died, the battery was gone. The charger was on his side of the bed, plugged into the wall just inches from his head. No. She left the dead phone. She left the keys. She simply turned the deadbolt, eased the apartment door open, and slipped out. She was barefoot. She didn't realize it until the abrasive concrete of the parking garage bit into the soles of her feet. It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the sound of her own breath, ragged in the cavernous echo, and the fact that Travis was not making it. Downtown Graybridge was a ghost town after midnight on a Tuesday. The neon signs of the bars on 4th Street were off, the sidewalks slick with a light, misting rain that wasn't quite warm. Lena ran. She ran until the adrenaline turned to acid in her muscles and her lungs burned. Her feet were screaming. A piece of glass or sharp gravel had opened a cut on her left heel, but the pain was distant, a signal from a ship she'd already abandoned. She was cold. The thin silk pajamas she'd worn to bed, a gift from him, were useless against the damp November air that clung to her skin, making her shiver violently. She was just a shadow, a blur of pale blue silk, moving from one pool of orange streetlight to the next. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to keep moving. She made the mistake at the intersection of Elm and 6th. She cut across the street without looking, her mind a blank wall of panic. Headlights, black and instant, flooded her vision. A horn blared, a sound swallowed by the squeal of high-performance tires on wet pavement. Lena froze, throwing her hands up as if she could stop 2 tons of metal. The car, a long black sedan that looked like polished obsidian, stopped. It stopped perhaps 6 inches from her knees. She stood there, shaking, her breath coming invisible. Silver plumes. The car just idled, a low, menacing purr. Inside the car, the silence was absolute. Dominic Varelli had not flinched. He watched the woman through the heavily tinted, bullet-resistant glass. She was a wreck, barefoot, in pajamas, hair plastered to her face by the rain. But it wasn't the vulnerability that made him speak. It was her eyes. He knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror. He had seen it on men before a raid, and on the faces of people who had lost everything. It was the look of an animal that had chewed off its own leg to get out of a trap. It was pure, uncut desperation. "Stop the car, Sal," he said, his voice quiet, resonating with a gravelly authority that needed no volume. "Boss, we're on a schedule." Sal, his driver and most trusted man, griped the wheel. "I said stop." Sal put the car in park. The engine settled into its quiet rumble. Dominic watched her for another 5 seconds. She hadn't moved. She was paralyzed. A deer caught in the headlights of a predator. He pressed the button to lower his rear window. The glass slid down with a faint, expensive whir. The cold air hit his face. Lena flinched at the sound. her eyes trying to penetrate the darkness of the back seat. "Get in the car," Dominic said. It wasn't a request. Lena's mind screamed, "This is how it ends. This is the other kind of bad, the kind you don't escape," but her body was betraying her. The warmth leaching from the open car door, the scent of rich leather and something clean and masculine, was a siren song. The alternative was the street. The alternative was Travis waking up, finding her gone, and coming after her. And he would come after her. She moved. One shaky step, then another. She didn't get in the back with him. She fumbled with the front passenger door handle and fell into the seat. Sal, the driver, looked straight ahead, his face like stone. "Where are you going?" Dominic asked from the back. "Away," Lena whispered. Her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely form the word. I don't know." "Sal, take her to doctor." "Azarov's?" Sal nodded, put the car in gear, and pulled away from the curb as smoothly as if they hadn't just picked up a half-naked, barefoot woman in the middle of the night. Lena watched the city lights blur. They drove for 10 minutes, away from downtown, toward the old medical district, a place of quiet brick buildings and wrought iron fences. The clinic was not a clinic. It was the ground floor of a converted brownstone, the windows dark, a discreet brass plaque by the door that simply read, "Consulting." Sal parked in a private alley, and the man from the back seat was out before she'd figured out how to unbuckle her seatbelt. He opened her door. Now, in the dim alley light, she saw him. He was tall, taller than Travis. He was dressed in a suit so dark it seemed to drink the light. No tie. The top 2 buttons of his black shirt undone. His face was sharp, all angles and shadows, with dark eyes that seemed to assess everything at once. The cut on her foot, the way she shivered, the terror in her gaze. He looked to be in his mid-30s, but his eyes were ancient. "This is a private clinic," he said, his voice flat. "They'll check your feet. You're bleeding." She hadn't realized. She looked down. A dark, wet print was on the pavement where she'd stepped. Inside, a man in scrubs who looked more like a boxer than a doctor was waiting, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He was clearly just woken up. "Dominic, what the hell?" the doctor grumbled, then saw Lena. His face softened, just a fraction. "All right, in the chair." Lena resisted, pulling back. "No, I can't pay. I don't have insurance. He'll take care of it," the man named Dominic said from the doorway. He never came fully into the light. He just watched. She sat. The doctor was gentle, cleaning the cut, his broad hands surprisingly deft. He applied 5 stitches with practiced efficiency, his touch firm. He gave her a tetanus shot. "No police," Lena said suddenly, the words tumbling out, desperate. The doctor paused, needle in hand. "Please, you can't call the police. Or him, please. I can't go back." Dominic stepped fully into the room. The light hit his face, revealing a faint, old scar that ran from his temple into his hairline. "What's your name?" Lena's jaw tightened. A name was a link. A name was a way to be found. "I can't—" He nodded, a short, sharp dip of his chin, as if this was the answer he expected. "Doctor, Azarov doesn't work with the police, and he doesn't work for him. Whoever he is. I can't go back," she whispered again, the tears finally welling, hot and sharp. "You don't understand. He'll find me." Dominic pulled something from his inside jacket pocket, a small, black burner phone, still in its plastic wrapper. He placed it on the sterile tray next to her. "This is clean," he said. "It has 1 number in it, mine. Use it if you need it." He paused, his gaze unreadable. "You need a place to sleep. Just for the night." She looked at him, her eyes wide with suspicion. Every instinct screaming. "Why?" "Because you're bleeding on a doctor's floor at 3 a.m, he said, a ghost of something pulling at his lips. "And I'm not a monster." He turned to the doctor. "Send me the bill." He offered her a place, a penthouse. He called it, above one of his properties. "A quiet place," he'd said. "There's a man at the door. He won't let anyone in. That includes me. Just for the night." The penthouse was stunning. It was a prison of glass and steel, 20 floors up. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Graybridge glittering below, A beautiful, cold galaxy. The furniture was all sharp lines, dark wood and plush, neutral fabrics. It was empty, soulless, and, she realized, utterly secure. The guard, a different man from the driver, had nodded at her and taken his post by the private elevator. He hadn't looked at her twice. Dominic had come up with her. The elevator opening directly into the suite. He walked her to the door and stopped, his hands in his pockets. "There's food in the fridge. Clothes in the guest closet. They're new. Sleep." Then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, and Lena was alone. And she broke. The silence. After months of Travis's constant criticism, his helpful suggestions, his music, his presence was deafening. It pressed in on her. She walked through the massive living room, into a guest bedroom larger than her entire old apartment, and into the adjoining bathroom. It was marble, all of it. A vast, cavernous space with a freestanding tub in the center. Lena didn't turn on the lights. She just climbed into the tub, still wearing her blood-stained, damp pajamas and the clinic's paper slippers. She curled into a ball, her knees to her chest, and finally, let the sobs come. They were ragged, silent, choking gasps for air that hurt her chest. She was crying for the last 2 years, for the photographer she used to be, for the woman who had believed Travis when he said she was brilliant, only to slowly replace her brilliance with his own shadow. She cried because she was barefoot and alone, in a stranger's palace, and she was terrified. She didn't hear the penthouse door open. She didn't hear the soft, heavy footsteps on the hardwood floor. "I thought you might need this," Lena yelped, a raw animal sound. She scrambled back, hitting her head hard on the porcelain. Dominic was standing in the bathroom doorway. His frame filled it. He wasn't looking at her, but at the wall beside her, his gaze deliberately averted. In his hand, he held a simple gray sweatsuit and a t-shirt. He hadn't left the building. "Get out," she hissed, the fear making her voice sharp and brittle. You said you wouldn't." "I heard you," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. It didn't waver. "I'm not coming in. He stopped, as if searching for words that didn't come naturally. "You're safe here. From him, and from me. I'm not him." He placed the clothes on the floor, just outside the bathroom door. "You're freezing," he said. "You can't sleep in those." He was right. Her body was shaking, not just from tears, but from a deep, bone-cold chill that had set in hours ago. He still didn't look at her. He just looked at the empty space in the hallway, as if giving her the privacy of his blind spot. "Undress and breathe," he murmured, the words so quiet she barely caught them. "Just breathe. I'll be right outside." He stepped back, pulling the bathroom door almost closed, leaving it open just a crack. A sliver of warm hallway light cut into the darkness, landing on the small pile of clean clothes. It took her 20 minutes. 20 minutes to stop shaking long enough to stand, to peel the damp, soiled pajamas from her skin. The new clothes were soft, impossibly warm, and smelled like nothing. Not like Travis's cologne, not like bleach, just clean. She scrubbed her face with water, washed the dried blood from her leg, and walked out. Dominic was not right outside. He was on the massive sectional couch in the living room, staring out the window at the city. A plate of food, a simple sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water were on the coffee table. He heard her. He turned. He didn't stand. He just nodded toward the food. She ate. She ate like a wolf, realizing she hadn't eaten since lunch yesterday, which felt like a lifetime ago. He said nothing. He just watched the city, giving her the dignity of his silence. When she finished, she spoke to the empty plate. I'm not broken." His dark eyes flicked to her. "I'm just lost," she whispered. Dominic held her gaze. He didn't offer platitudes. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He just listened. Travis. She stopped. The name was ash in her mouth. "I think I need to sleep. The guest room is there." He motioned with his chin. Lena looked at the dark hallway, at the closed door. It felt too final. too much like the apartment she'd just fled. She curled up on the opposite end of the massive couch, pulling her feet under her, the soft sweatpants a comfort. Is it okay if I just... Here? A muscle in his jaw twitched. Fine. She thought he would leave, go to one of the other rooms. But he didn't. He just sat there, a 10-foot expanse of gray cushion between them, and returned his gaze to the window. Lena's eyes grew heavy. The exhaustion was a drug, but for the first time in hours, the shaking in her hands had eased. She fell asleep to the sound of her own quiet breathing and the silent presence of a man who was, for tonight, a better guardian than any lock. Dominic sat for another hour, listening to her breathing deepen, shifting from shallow and panic to the deep, even rhythm of true exhaustion. He had lied. He was a monster. He was just a different kind. He remembered another woman. Another night. 6 years ago, Alara. She had trusted him. She had loved him. And he had loved her in his own broken, possessive way. He'd been arrogant. He'd been young. He'd thought his name was protection enough. He'd left her at their apartment, to handle a business dispute, a simple message to the Salatis. He'd come back to a broken door, the smell of gunpowder and roses, and her lying on the hardwood floor, her eyes open and empty. She had died alone. She had died because he wasn't there. He had promised himself that night, as he held her cooling body, that he would never let anyone close again. Protection wasn't about love. It was about distance. It was about walls. He looked at the woman on his couch. He didn't have a name for her, but Sal was already digging. He would have one by morning, even in sleep. She was tense. Her fingers, curled near her face, were trembling, a faint, intermittent tremor that hadn't stopped even as she'd eaten. He looked at her, at the raw, fresh wound of her escape, and felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Not pity, not desire, responsibility. He made the silent decision. He didn't know why. He didn't care. He had failed to protect Alara. He would not fail this one. He would not let her be unprotected. He would find out who him was, and he would make sure he never touched her again. Lena woke to the smell of coffee. It was a rich, dark roast smell, and for a disoriented second, it was wrong. Travis drank tea. He hated the smell of coffee, said it was a crude stimulant. Then, the night came rushing back. The run, the car, the man named Dominic. She was on the couch, the one she'd fallen asleep on. The soft gray sweatsuit she wore was rumpled, but warm. Sunlight, bright and sharp, was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The penthouse was silent, except for the distant, muffled sound of city traffic, 20 floors below. She sat up. Her body ached, her feet throbbed, a dull pain from the stitches in her heel. The man, Dominic, was gone. The plate and water bottle from the night before had vanished. She was alone. Or was she? A new, colder panic began to seep into her veins. The silence of the apartment was too perfect. It was the silence of an exhibit, not a home. She pushed herself off the couch and walked, barefoot, across the cold hardwood floor. She went to the private elevator, the only way in or out. She pressed the call button. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder. The small, illuminated panel remained dark. She backed away, her heart starting to trip over itself. A cage, a beautiful, glass-walled cage. She saw the door. It was set flush into the wall near the elevator, a service entrance she hadn't noticed last night. She ran to it, her hands fumbling for a knob. It was locked. She beat on it with the heel of her hand. "Hello? Is anyone there? Let me out." She heard a sound on the other side, a heavy thud, like a chair being moved. A small peephole cover slid open. An eye, cold and blue, looked back at her. Then the cover slid shut. Lena stumbled back, a sob catching in her throat. She wasn't a guest. She was a prisoner. The man last night, his kindness, the food, the clothes, it was all a lie. Just a different kind of trap, built by a different kind of man. He's not a prisoner. He's my security. Lena spun around. Dominic was standing in the archway of the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee. He was dressed in the same clothes as last night, his dark shirt wrinkled, a shadow of stubble on his sharp jaw. He looked like he hadn't slept. "He's there to keep people out," Dominic said, his voice a low rumble. "Not to keep you in." You locked me in," she panted, her back pressing against the useless door. "The elevator won't work." "I disabled it." He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. "For your protection. And, as of 10 minutes ago, I know who I'm protecting." He set a tablet down on the massive dining room table, its screen dark. Lena Carter, age 29, freelance photographer residing at the Altamira Tower, apartment 1405, with Travis Melling, marketing executive, Melling Price Imports. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. He knew. He knew her name. He knew Travis. "How?" "My driver, Sal, is a thorough man." He motioned to the table, to the tablet. "He was also thorough about Travis Melling. He's a marketing guy," Lena whispered, the words sounding hollow even to her. "He's controlling. He stole money, my money." Dominic's face was impassive. "He stole more than that, and he's not a marketing guy. Lena, Melling Price Imports is a shell, a very sophisticated one. Did you know he runs 3 different charities?" Lena flinched. The logos she'd designed, the fundraiser websites she'd helped him build, the Children's Hand Foundation, the Gray Bridge Renewal Project. "They don't exist," Dominic said flatly. He tapped the tablet. The screen lit up. It showed a complex flow chart, names and accounts, lines connecting boxes. "They are money laundering operations, and not for him. He's a lapdog. He works for the Salati family." The name meant nothing to Lena. "The who?" "My rivals," Dominic said, and the word was cold steel. "A criminal organization, and Travis Melling is their accountant. The money you found, the fraud you uncovered, that wasn't him skimming from his clients. That was you stumbling into a federal case." Lena sank into one of the heavy dining chairs, her legs giving out. It was too much. No, Travis. He's vain. He's arrogant. He's not that." "He is that," Dominic said, his voice cutting through her denial. "He's a man who launders money for killers. And when those killers find out he's been sloppy enough to get caught by his girlfriend, the same girlfriend who designed his fake charity websites, what do you think they'll do, Lena?" He didn't have to say it. She wasn't just running from an abusive ex. She was a loose end. I have to go," she said, standing up on shaky legs. I'll go to the police. I'll tell them." "Go where?" Dominic's voice was quiet, logical, and terrifyingly calm. "Back to your apartment. He's looking for you. He called your mother in Ohio at 5 this morning, asking if you were there. The police. What do you tell them? That your ex is laundering money for the Salatis? You'll be a material witness. You'll be in a holding cell by noon. And the Salatis will have a cop on their payroll post your bail before you've even finished your statement." He let the cold, hard truth of it settle in the space between them. She had nowhere to go. There was no one to call. The entire system she'd relied on was a cobweb, and she had just seen the spider. "You're overwhelmed," he said, his voice softening just a fraction. "And you're still in shock." He picked up the coffee mug. "Stay. Just stay. Eat. Take a shower. The guest room is yours. There are new clothes in the closet, all sizes. Nothing will happen to you in this building. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm offering you space. Time to think." He didn't pressure her. He didn't threaten. He just stated facts. And that absence of pressure, after 2 years of Travis's constant, subtle manipulation, was the only thing that kept her from screaming. She nodded, a tiny, jerky movement. She retreated to the guest room and locked the door. She stayed in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing her skin until it was raw, trying to wash off the last 2 years, trying to wash off the feel of Travis's hands and the clinical cold of Dominic's truth. Later that evening, the penthouse was quiet again. The guard was gone from the service door, and the elevator, she found, now chimed softly when she pressed the button. She didn't get in. Dominic was in the kitchen. He was cooking. The sight was so jarringly domestic. It stopped her in the hallway. This man, who spoke of criminal organizations and murder with the casualness of a weather report, was sautéing garlic in a pan. "It's just pasta," he said, not turning around. "I hope you're hungry." They ate at the massive dining table, the city of Greybridge glittering below them, a carpet of indifferent stars. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the sound of forks on porcelain. Lena put her fork down. She couldn't eat. She had to know. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice small but clear. He looked up, his dark eyes unreadable in the dim light. "I told you. Dominic Varelli. That's a name. It's not an answer." She took a breath, gathering the last of her courage. "You talk about the Salatis like they're a rival corporation. You have security at your doors. You have doctors who work for you in the middle of the night. You're like them, aren't you?" Dominic leaned back, placing his own fork down. "I am not like them. How are you different? You're a criminal." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I have rules. They don't. The Salatis deal in poison. They traffic women, they prey on the weak, they put their money over their blood." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "I have a code. Lena, I protect my people. I protect my territory. I do not hurt civilians, and I do not tolerate men who hurt women. But you do hurt people," she whispered. His gaze was unflinching. "I do what is necessary. There are no good men in my world, Lena. Just ones who are better than others." The conversation died. Lena went back to pushing the pasta around her plate. She got up to clear the dishes, needing to do something, anything, with her hands. She took his plate and hers to the sink. She was washing a chef's knife, her hands still unsteady from the day's revelations. The ceramic plate beneath it was slippery. Her hand slipped. The blade bit into the side of her index finger. "Damn it," she hissed, pulling her hand back. Blood, bright red, welled up instantly, dripping onto the white porcelain sink. The chair didn't just scrape. It crashed. In a split second, Dominic was across the kitchen. He wasn't the calm, detached man from dinner. This was someone else. His face was a mask of fierce, contained energy. "Give me your hand." It was a command that rattled her to her bones. She was too startled to move. He didn't wait. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like a steel manacle, and turned her to face the sink. He thrust her hand under the cold water. "It's just a little cut," she stammered, shocked more by his reaction than the cut itself. "Be quiet," he growled. He was not angry at her. It was a strange, impersonal fury directed at the injury itself. His thumb, calloused and impossibly strong, pressed down on the cut, cutting off the blood flow. His other hand was still wrapped around her wrist, his body pressed close, shielding her, though she didn't know from what. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the bunched-up muscle in his arm, the faint, clean scent of his soap. He held her there for a long minute, the only sounds the running water and her own ragged breathing. He let go of her wrist only to grab a clean dish towel, wrapping it tightly around her finger. He was efficient, practiced. "The first aid kit is in the bathroom," he said, his voice still rough. I'll get it. Sit down." He pointed to a bar stool. He went himself, returning a moment later with a small, professional-looking kit. He unwrapped the towel. The bleeding had mostly stopped. He cleaned the cut with an antiseptic wipe, his large, dark hands surprisingly gentle. He was all controlled focus. He applied a bandage, his movements economical and precise. He was still holding her hand, his thumb resting on her pulse point. She was trembling. "Why?" she whispered, the question pulling itself from her lungs. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Why what? Why are you doing this? All of it, the clinic, the clothes, the bandage. I'm nothing to you." Dominic's expression was complicated. The fury was gone, replaced by something old and heavy. He looked down at her bandaged finger, still cradled in his palm. "Because," he said, his voice quiet, almost rough, "someone should have helped her. Back then?" Lena saw it, a flicker of something in his eyes, a shadow so deep it looked like a wound, guilt. This wasn't about her. It was about her, a ghost. This realization didn't make her feel used. It made her feel safe. He wasn't helping her because he wanted something from her. He was helping her because he had failed to help someone else. As if on cue, a low rumble of thunder sounded in the distance. A storm was rolling in. Within an hour, the rain was lashing against the windows, the wind howling around the corners of the building, and then, with a brilliant flash of lightning that lit the room in stark white and black, followed by a deafening crack of thunder, the power died. The penthouse was plunged into absolute darkness. The emergency lights didn't even flicker on. "Stay there," Dominic's voice came out of the black, calm and steady. "The generator will kick in." But it didn't. They waited in the suffocating dark. Lena heard him move, a scrape, the flick of a lighter. A small, brave flame appeared, and he lit a candle from a holder on the dining table. He lit another and another. Soon, the living room was filled with the soft, flickering glow of a dozen candles. The storm outside was muted, the city lights gone. The world had shrunk to just this room, just the two of them, surrounded by shadows. "The wind must have damaged the main line," he said. His face a mask of planes and hollows in the candlelight. The darkness, combined with the intimacy of the light, made her voice bolder. "I wasn't afraid of him hitting me," she said, her voice sounding strange in the quiet. Dominic, who had been looking out the window, turned to her. He did once, at the beginning, but he didn't need to." She looked down at her hands, at the new white bandage. "He was smarter than that. He erased me." She finally said it, the deepest, ugliest truth. "He told me my photos were nice, not important. He told me what to wear, what to eat, who to talk to. Slowly, I just disappeared. I stopped calling my friends. I stopped pitching to galleries. I became invisible." Tears welled, hot and stinging. "I'm not afraid he'll kill me. I'm afraid I'll never be me again. I'm afraid I don't even know who that is." Dominic didn't move. He just watched her, his dark eyes seeming to absorb the candlelight. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't tell her she was strong. He walked to the table where she sat. He reached out, not for her hand, but for her wrist, the one that wasn't bandaged. His fingers, warm and calloused, wrapped around it. His voice was a low, rough thing that vibrated through her skin. "I see you." That was all. Just 3 words, but they landed like a physical blow, stealing her breath. He wasn't looking at her like she was a victim. He was looking at her like he saw her, the woman who had run barefoot, the woman who had challenged him, the woman who was terrified but was still here. His thumb moved, a slow, deliberate slide across the thin, sensitive skin of her inner wrist. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot straight up her arm. She shivered. It was not from fear. It was from something else. Something deep and dormant that had just been woken. The air between them was thick, vibrating. The storm outside, the candlelight, his touch. He was still holding her wrist. His other hand came up, as if to touch her face. He was leaning in. She was leaning in, her lips parted. He stopped. Dominic's eyes closed for a brief second. A muscle in his jaw clenched so hard she could see it jump. He let go of her wrist as if it were burning. He stood up, his chair scraping violently on the floor. He was breathing hard. "The power is out," he said, his voice a gravelly rasp. It was all business. "The guard at the elevator is on high alert. You're safe." He was rebuilding the wall, brick by heavy brick. "Go to bed, Lena." He didn't wait for her to reply. He turned and walked into the darkness of his own wing of the penthouse. The click of his bedroom door was loud, final. Lena sat alone, her skin tingling, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was left with the flickering candles, the sound of the rain, and her wrist, which still burned from the ghost of his touch. The dream started soft. It started with the click of a camera shutter and the scent of darkroom chemicals. It was her old studio, the one she'd had before Travis, the one with the cracked plaster and the perfect northern light. Then the light shifted. It turned cold, artificial, the sterile white of the apartment she'd shared with him. Travis was there, smiling, but his eyes were wrong. They were flat, like shark's eyes. He was holding one of her photographs, a print she'd been so proud of. It's nice. Lena, he said, his voice a smooth, condescending caress. But it's not important. He set the photo on fire. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. He just kept burning them, one by one, her entire portfolio turning to gray ash that coated her feet. You're nothing without me, he whispered, his face getting closer. You're invisible. No one even sees you. He reached for her, his hand closing around her throat. Lena woke up with a scream that tore her own throat raw. She wasn't in the guest room. She'd thrashed herself out of the bed, tangling in the sheets, and was now on the floor. Her back slammed against the wall. She was clawing at her own neck, trying to get his hand off. The door to her room burst open. Not just opened, slammed against the wall with a sound like a gunshot. Dominic was there. He was just a massive silhouette against the hallway light, his chest bare, wearing only a pair of dark sleep pants. He was across the room in 2 strides, his movements fluid and lethally fast. "Lena!" His voice cut through the fog. She screamed again, a raw sound of animal terror, flinching away from him, curling into a tighter ball. "No, no, no, please, Travis, don't. It's not him." Dominic's voice was rough, low, and urgent. He didn't grab her. He dropped into a crouch a few feet away, his hands open and visible. "It's Dominic. You're in the penthouse. You're safe. Look at me." She risked a glance. Her eyes wide, tears streaming. She was hyperventilating, her breath coming in short, useless gasps. "You're okay," he said, his voice dropping, gentling, smoothing out. "I'm not him. You're safe." He moved slowly, inching closer, not like a predator, but like a man approaching a terrified animal. When she didn't bolt, he reached out and laid one hand, warm and heavy, on her tangled hair. "It was a dream," he murmured. "Just a dream. That was all it took. The simple, solid touch, the quiet confirmation, the dam of her composure, already cracked, shattered completely." A sob ripped out of her, a sound of such profound grief and fear that it seemed to shake her entire frame. She didn't move toward him, but she didn't pull away. He took that as permission. Dominic slid forward, bracing himself against the wall and pulling her in. He didn't hug her. He gathered her. He pulled her out of the tangled sheets and into his lap, his back against the wall, her side pressed against the solid, warm wall of his chest. She was still sobbing, burying her face in his shirt. He was... "Shh," he rumbled, his hand moving from her hair to her back, rubbing in slow, firm circles. He was just a solid object in the dark, a shield. "He's not here." He held her. He just held her as she cried, her body shaking with the force of it. He didn't offer empty words. He didn't tell her to stop. He just let her break, anchoring her so she wouldn't fly apart. After several long minutes, the sobs began to quiet, but the shaking didn't stop. He realized her t-shirt, the one she'd slept in, was plastered to her skin, soaked through with cold sweat. Her skin was clammy. "You're freezing," he said, his voice a low vibration against her ear. He shifted, trying to pull the blanket from the bed, but she whimpered, her hands clutching his shirt as if he were trying to leave. "I'm not going," he said instantly. "I'm right here, but you're soaked. You need to get out of that shirt." He felt her tense, a new, different kind of fear. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, almost rough with a strained tenderness. He tipped her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze in the dim light. "Undress and breathe." The words, his words, the ones he'd used in the bathroom that first night, they were a touchstone, a reminder. "Just breathe," he whispered again. "I'm right here. You're safe." Her fingers were shaking too hard to grip the hem of her shirt. She fumbled, a small, frustrated sound catching in her throat. "Okay," he said. "Easy. I'll help." He was methodical, careful. His movements were completely impersonal, his touch clinical. He slid his hands under the hem of the shirt, gathering the damp cotton. "Lift your arms." She did, her arms weak. He pulled the shirt up and over her head in one smooth motion, not letting his hands linger, not letting his gaze drop. He tossed the damp shirt aside, into the darkness. She was left in her bra, her skin instantly erupting in goosebumps in the cold air. Before she could even register the vulnerability, he was stripping the thick, heavy blanket from the bed and wrapping it around her, cocooning her. He tucked it under her chin, his knuckles brushing her jaw. Then he pulled her back against his chest, her back to his front, and wrapped his arms around the outside of the blanket. He rocked her, a slow, steady, back-and-forth motion, like a man who had forgotten how to comfort but whose body remembered the rhythm. He sat there, on the cold floor, holding her, his own body heat soaking into her back until her breathing finally evened out and the tremors faded, replaced by the heavy pull of utter exhaustion. When Lena woke again, she knew, instantly, that she was not in her own bed. The mattress was firmer, the sheets a higher thread count, and the scent. It was not the guest room's sterile linen, it was him. A faint, masculine scent of clean soap, sandalwood, and something uniquely Dominic. She opened her eyes. The room was massive, decorated in shades of charcoal and deep navy blue. Sunlight was pouring in, but it was a different angle. This was his room. She was in his bed. She was still wrapped in the blanket, her body warm, her clothes. She was still in her sweatpants and bra. She was untouched. The other side of the king-size bed was pristine, the pillow undented. A jolt of confusion, not fear, went through her. She sat up, clutching the blanket, and looked around. The room was as controlled and minimalist as he was. A dresser, a high-backed chair, no clutter. Dominic was asleep, slumped in that chair in the corner, his head at an awkward angle, his arms crossed over his bare chest. He hadn't even bothered to get a blanket. He had stayed. He had slept on the couch. No, on a hard, unyielding chair, just to be in the room. Lena's throat tightened. Travis, after her one attempt to wake him from a nightmare, had told her she was too high maintenance and had gone to sleep in the guest room. Dominic hadn't left. He hadn't touched her. He had simply stayed. She looked at him, really looked at him. In the unfiltered morning light, the scar at his temple was stark, a pale silver against his skin. His face, in sleep, was younger. The harsh lines of control softened, but his brow was still furrowed, as if even his dreams were serious. She slipped out of the bed, her bare feet hitting the plush rug. She draped the heavy blanket from the bed over him. He didn't stir, but his breathing seemed to deepen, his face relaxing for the first time. She was confused. She was overwhelmed. But as she stood there, looking at the most dangerous man she'd ever met, she realized, with a startling clarity, that she was no longer afraid of him. She spent the next few hours exploring. The penthouse was a fortress, but it was also, she was discovering, a home, his home. She'd been too scared to really see it before. She found his study. The door was unlocked. The room was the heart of the apartment, and it was the complete opposite of his bedroom. This room was lived in. One wall was floor-to-ceiling glass, like the living room. The other three were covered in dark, mahogany bookshelves, crammed with books, not just for show, but read. Worn spines, dog-eared pages, ledgers and philosophy, Sun Tzu and Marcus Aurelius, modern thrillers and classic poetry. His desk was a massive piece of wood, clean but not empty. A laptop sat closed. A single, heavy, old-fashioned pen lay beside a stack of papers. And on the corner of the desk, a small, silver-framed photograph. Lena was drawn to it. She picked it up. It was Dominic, but it was a version she didn't recognize. He was younger, perhaps in his late 20s. He was smiling, a real, unguarded smile that lit up his eyes and changed his entire face. His arm was wrapped around a young woman, her head thrown back in laughter, her hair a wild cascade of dark curls. She was beautiful, vibrant, and looked at him like he was the only man in the world. A sharp, unexpected pang of something went through Lena. Her name was Alara. Lena jumped, the frame slipping in her hand. Dominic was standing in the doorway. He was dressed now, in a fresh black t-shirt and gray slacks, his feet bare. His face was back to its usual controlled mask, but his eyes were on the photograph. I'm sorry," Lena stammered, putting the photo down. I shouldn't have. The door was open. It's fine. He walked into the room. Not angry, just heavy. He picked up the frame, his thumb brushing over the glass. She was my fiancée. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. A man reading a weather report? It was 6 years ago, almost to the day. She's beautiful, Lena said softly. He nodded, a short, sharp movement. She was loud, and she was stubborn, and she didn't listen to me. He put the photo back down, his back to Lena. She was killed during a turf war with the Salatis. Lena's breath hitched. The Salatis? The ones... Travis? The same. His voice was ice. It was a message. They wanted to break me, to show me that I couldn't protect what was mine. He turned to face her, and his eyes were not the eyes of the man who had slept in the chair. They were the eyes of the man who had spoken of codes and rivals. They were old and cold, and filled with a guilt so profound it was a physical presence in the room. She was at our apartment. I left her unprotected for 1 hour, he said. I went to handle a business dispute. I told her to wait. She went out to get flowers. They were waiting for her. He looked away at the city skyline. I still blame myself. I told her I would keep her safe, and I failed. It wasn't just them who killed her. It was me. Lena looked at this man, this killer, this protector, and she saw the truth. He wasn't helping her because of some abstract code. He was helping her because he was trying to save a ghost. That's why you helped me, she said. It wasn't a question. He met her gaze. You had her eyes. Her eyes? No, he corrected himself, shaking his head. Not her eyes. The look in your eyes, that night. Desperation, the look of someone who was about to be erased. I wouldn't watch it happen again, Something in Lena's chest, something that had been knotted tight for years, finally unraveled. He wasn't seeing her as a replacement, he was seeing her as a second chance. She stepped closer. He tensed, his body going rigid, a wall snapping back into place. You're wrong, she said, her voice quiet but fierce. His eyes narrowed. Wrong? You're not to blame. The Salatis are the men who did it, not you. She was standing in front of him now, close enough to feel the heat from his body. You can't carry that. It's not yours. You don't know my world. Lena? I know guilt, she said. I know what it feels like to blame yourself for things you can't control. She did something she hadn't even planned. She raised her hand, not to his face, but to his chest, right over his heart. She could feel the steady, slow thump of it beneath her palm. His t-shirt was soft. The muscle beneath it was like stone. Your heart is still beating, she whispered. That means you're still here. You're not the ghost. Dominic's breathing had stopped. He was looking at her hand on his chest as if it were a live wire. His eyes, when they met hers, were blazing. The control was gone, replaced by a raw, unguarded hunger that terrified and thrilled her. Lena, he warned, his voice a low growl. Don't what? She breathed, her own heart hammering. Don't touch you. Don't pity me. It's not pity, she said, and she knew it was the truest thing she had said in years. It's choice. She leaned up, her hand pressing flat against his chest, and she kissed him. It was hesitant at first, just the press of her lips against his. His mouth was firm, warm, and unresponsive. He was frozen, a statue of resistance. She didn't pull away. She softened, her lips moving, a silent question. She wasn't asking for passion. She was asking for connection. For a second, he resisted. Then, with a low sound in his throat that was halfway to a groan, he gave in. He kissed her back. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't hesitant. It was 6 years of guilt, 6 years of loneliness, and a lifetime of control shattering in a single, devastating moment. His hand came up, not to her face, but to the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her steady as his mouth claimed hers. It was a firm, deep, achingly emotional kiss. It was fire and control. It was want and restraint. It tasted of coffee and the storm that had passed. Lena's knees went weak, and she gripped his shirt to stay standing. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. He broke away, his hands grasping her shoulders, pushing her back, but not letting her go. He was breathing heavily, his forehead pressed to hers, his eyes squeezed shut. "No," he rasped, his voice raw. "Not like this. Dominic." "No." He pulled back fully, his face a mask of self-loathing. "Not when you still feel like you owe me. Not when I'm the one locking the doors. You feel safe. You think. You're grateful. This isn't real." "It is real," Lena insisted, her voice shaking with an emotion she couldn't name. "It's my choice. I'm not broken. Dominic. I'm not a charity case. I kissed you. It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." The sharp, sudden ring of a phone cut through the tension. It was the burner phone he'd given her, the one she'd left on the kitchen counter. Dominic's head snapped up, his entire demeanor changing in an instant. The lever was gone. The boss was back. He strode from the study, Lena following. The phone was buzzing, insistent, on the granite. He didn't pick it up. He looked at the number. "It's not my number. It's mine," Lena said, confused. My old phone. How He's trying to see if it's active," Dominic said, his voice clipped. "He's pinging it. He's looking for you." As if to prove his point, his own personal phone, the one on his desk, began to ring. He walked back to the study, looked at the caller ID, and his face went dark. He answered it. "Sal, talk to me." He listened, his back to Lena. She watched the muscles in his shoulders bunch and tighten. "Where?" he said. He listened again. "How many?" "I don't care. Double it. I want a perimeter on this building that a mouse couldn't get through. And find her." He hung up, his hand clenching the phone so tightly Lena thought it might crack. "What is it?" she asked. "That was Sal," he said, turning to her. His eyes were flat. "Travis is looking for you, and he knows you're alive. How? He can't—" "He has eyes everywhere," Dominic said. "Salati muscle. He's been at your mother's. He's been to your old studio. He's pulling every string he has. He's desperate. He'll find me," she whispered. "The old fear, cold and sharp, returning." "No," Dominic said. "It was a vow. He won't—" He picked up his phone again and dialed a number. "Marla? Change of plans. I need you at the penthouse. Now." "Yes, it's time." He hung up. "You're not going to be alone. Not for a second. I'm assigning you a bodyguard. Marla, she's one of my best. She'll be with you when I'm not." "A bodyguard," Lena said, the word feeling alien in her mouth. "This is my world now." "Lena," he said, his voice hard, "and you're in it. That means you're protected." He left her then, going to his room to make more calls. Lena was left alone in the kitchen, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her blood running cold with the news. She looked at her laptop, the one Sal had retrieved for her from a storage unit, full of her old photography work. She was done being invisible. She was done being erased. She sat down. She opened a file, a photo she'd taken of a homeless man, his eyes full of a life she'd almost forgotten. She began to edit, her fingers flying over the keys, and as she worked, she opened an encrypted email client. She started to type, sending an anonymous tip to a journalist she'd once admired. She attached a small, seemingly innocent file, the logo for the Children's Hand Foundation. It was time to stop running. It was time to fight back. The invitation had been on Dominic's desk for a week. A fundraiser for the Graybridge City Restoration Fund, a glossy, embossed card that was, in reality, a polite shakedown of the city's wealthy, both legitimate and otherwise. "It's a trap," Lena said, her voice flat. She was standing in the master closet, looking at the dress Marla, her new, ever-present shadow, had just brought in. Marla was a compact woman with quiet eyes and a coiled spring energy. She said little, but her presence was a comfort, a constant reminder that Lena was no longer alone. Dominic leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "It's not a trap. It's bait. Traps are hidden. Bait is seen." "Bait for who? Travis?" "For his masters," Dominic said. "Travis is desperate, which makes him sloppy. But the Salatis are not. They are watching. They want to know who has you." What they're really asking is if you are a liability or an asset. Tonight, we show them. By dressing me up and parading me around, the old bitterness, the fear of being a possession crept into her voice. He stepped into the room, his gaze softening, just a fraction. No. By showing them you are not the victim they're looking for. You are not a terrified woman hiding in my tower. You are Elena Russo, and you are with me. The dress was a deep, midnight blue, a heavy silk that felt like liquid in her hands. It had a low-cut back and a simple, devastating neckline. Marla helped her with her hair, pulling it back into a complex, elegant twist that left a few tendrils to frame her face. The makeup was subtle, emphasizing her eyes, which were no longer haunted, but wary and sharp. When she was ready, she looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger. She was pale and nervous. Yes, but her shoulders were straight. The blue of the dress made her skin look like porcelain. She was not the woman who had run barefoot through the streets. Dominic was waiting by the private elevator, a shadow in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He was not a man in a suit. He was a panther poured into wool and silk. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His breath hitched. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible sound, but she heard it. His eyes, those dark, controlled eyes, roamed over her once. A slow burn that started at her throat and traveled down the length of the dress and back up. It was not a look of lust, though that was there. It was a look of possession, of pride. He offered his arm. As she took it, he spoke, his voice low. Elena Russo is a visiting art curator from Chicago. She's a new friend. You are opinionated about modern art and you find this city's architecture derivative. You are not, under any circumstances. Lena Carter. I understand, she said. Sal was waiting with the car. Dominic helped her in. His hand splayed on her bare back, just above the low cut of the dress. His touch was firm, his palm warm, and a jolt went through her, sharp and electric. He didn't move it until she was seated. And even then, his fingers lingered. A silent promise. The fundraiser was a sea of noise, diamonds and forced smiles. The ballroom of the Graybridge Grand was a symphony of crystal chandeliers and the dull roar of 100 conversations. Lena's hand tightened on Dominic's arm. This was Travis's world. These were the people he'd so desperately wanted to be, the ones he'd stolen and lied to impress. Breathe, Dominic murmured, his lips close to her ear. He didn't hide her. He did the opposite. He steered her directly into the center of the room, a shark gliding through minnows. Men, powerful men with cold eyes, stopped to shake his hand, their gazes sliding to Lena, assessing. Dominic, a silver-haired man said, clapping Dominic on the shoulder. Good to see you supporting the community. His eyes were reptilian, flicking to Lena. And you've brought a guest. Councilman, Dominic said, his voice smooth. This is Elena Russo. Elena. This is Councilman Peters, who pretends to run the city. The man laughed, a dry, false sound. Lena smiled, a tight, polite expression she'd perfected under Travis's tutelage. A pleasure. I was just telling Dominic the architecture here is fascinating. The man's smile faltered, and Dominic's hand squeezed her arm in silent approval. For an hour. She played the part. She was Elena. She was confident. She was untouchable, wrapped in Dominic's power as surely as she was wrapped in blue silk. But the pretense was blurring. When she leaned in to whisper a comment to him, she found herself leaning into his strength, his scent, the solid wall of his body. It felt less like an act and more like a homecoming. She must have tensed, a flicker of the old fear passing through her as she saw a man with Travis's sandy hair near the bar. Dominic felt the change in her instantly. His hand left her arm and slid to the small of her back, a warm, possessive weight. He guided her through a set of glass doors onto a wide stone terrace overlooking the city. The air was cooler out here. The noise of the party a dull thrum behind them. They were alone. It wasn't him, he said, his voice quiet. I know. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her hands gripping the cold stone balustrade. For a second, I felt like that woman again, the one hiding, the fraud. He stepped up behind her, not touching, but so close she could feel the heat of his body. "Look at me." "Lena," she turned. He was a dark shape against the bright lights of the ballroom, his face in shadow. He reached up, his thumb brushing a stray tendril of hair from her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle. "He's not in this city tonight, I know, because my men are watching his every move, but his people are in that room, the Salatis. They are watching." His thumb grazed her jawline. "They see you, and they see you with me." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the cool night air. "You are safe. With me. Always." His words, his touch, the intensity in his gaze, it was a potent combination. Her heart was pounding, a heavy, slow beat against her ribs. "Dominic," she breathed, the kiss from his study, the one he'd broken, hung in the air between them. This was different. This wasn't a study. This was a stage. "They're watching," he said again, his eyes on her mouth. "Show them who you are." It was a command. It was permission. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She met him halfway. The kiss was slow. It was not the desperate, frantic collision from before. This was a deliberate, passionate claiming. His lips were firm, warm, and tasted of the whiskey he'd been nursing. He wasn't just kissing her. He was learning her. A slow exploration that was both public statement and private conversation. Her hands came up, not to his shoulders, but to his lapels, gripping the fabric. His hand, the one that had been on her back, slid down to her waist, his fingers splayed wide, pulling her closer, until there was no space, no air between them. His other hand came up to cup her jaw, holding her for his kiss. It was undeniably passionate. It was a slow, burning heat that lingered, a promise of more. He deepened the kiss, his mouth moving over hers with a confident, aching possessiveness that made her knees weak. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Her lips were swollen, her eyes dark. His gaze was intense, the control back, but a fire burning just beneath it. "Let's go home," he said, his voice thick. The ride back to the penthouse was silent. The air in the car was electric, charged with unspoken, unfulfilled tension. Marla and Sal were shadows, unseen and unheard. The moment the private elevator doors opened into the penthouse, Marla murmured, "Good night, ma'am. I'll be by the service entrance." Dominic didn't turn on the main lights. The room was illuminated only by the massive wall of windows, the city lights glittering below. He went straight to the bar, his back to her, and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He unclipped his bow tie and undid the top button of his shirt, the controlled motions of a man trying to regain his composure. He handed her a glass. She didn't take it. "That was quite a show tonight," she said, her voice quiet, but clear. He took a drink from his own glass. It was necessary. The kiss, was that necessary? Show them who you are. Who am I? Dominic. Am I Elena? Am I Lena? Or am I just her? The ghost you're trying to save. He turned, his eyes flashing in the dim light. "Don't, no." She stepped toward him, her blood up, the adrenaline from the night finally finding a voice. "You kissed me. You held me. You saw me, and then you pushed me away. And tonight, you kissed me again, for an audience. You're a hypocrite." "You don't know what you're talking about," he growled. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." She was in front of him now, jabbing a finger into his solid chest. "You're a coward. You're not afraid of the Salatis. You're not afraid of Travis. You're afraid of this. Lena, be careful. I'm done being careful. I am done being managed, and I am done being a project." Her voice broke, just for a second. "You're so desperate to atone for failing Alara that you've put me in her place. But I'm not her. Dominic, I am here. And you're hiding." She looked him straight in the eye, her own gaze unwavering. "Why won't you let yourself feel anything real? Why won't you let me be real?" The words hung in the air, a challenge, an accusation, a plea. He stared at her, his jaw clenching, a war raging behind his eyes. He said nothing. He just set his glass down on the bar with a heavy, definitive clink. "Feel," he finally said, his voice a low, raw thing that vibrated through her. "You want to know what I feel, Lena?" He was on her in a single and fluid step. He didn't grab her. He didn't push her. He invaded her space, backing her up against the cold glass of the window, his body a wall of heat, caging her in. His hands came up, not to grab, but to frame her face, his palms hard, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "I feel everything," he whispered, his voice ravaged. "I feel you in my office. I feel you in my bed. I feel you when I'm holding a gun. And I feel you when I'm trying to sleep. You undo me." And he kissed her. It was not a performance. It was not a claiming. It was a surrender. It was all the desperation, all the safety, all the fire and care he had been holding back. His mouth was on hers, raw, hungry, and impossibly tender. This was not the man who ran the city. This was the man who had slept in a chair, who had bandaged her finger, who had seen her at her most broken. "Then let me," she breathed against his lips. "Let me in." He broke the kiss, only to lift her, his arms sweeping under her legs as if she weighed nothing. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her heart hammering. He carried her to his bedroom, the one she had woken in, and kicked the door shut. He didn't toss her on the bed. He laid her down, gently, his eyes never leaving hers, a question in them. "Are you sure?" She answered by reaching up and touching the scar at his temple, the one she had seen in the light. He flinched, but she didn't pull away. She traced it, a silent message. "I see all of you." A sound, something between a groan and a sob, tore from his throat. The blue dress was a barrier. He didn't rip it. His hands, those large, calloused, violent hands, were impossibly slow. He found the zipper and drew it down, the sound like a gunshot in the silent room. He peeled the silk from her shoulders, his touch aching, as if he were unwrapping something infinitely fragile. Every touch was fire. Every glance was care. He undressed her slowly, his gaze reverent, and when she was bare, he shed his own clothes, his eyes never leaving hers. He was a landscape of scars and hard-earned muscle, a map of the life he lived. He came to her on the bed, not with the fire she expected, but with a restraint that was almost painful. He kissed her mouth, her jaw, her throat, his lips leaving a trail of heat. His hands learned her, mapping her ribs, her waist, the curve of her hip. She was not a ghost. She was not a replacement. She was Lena. And she was his. He moved over her, his body a solid, warm weight, and for the first time in her life, Lena felt completely, utterly safe. She was with a man who killed, a man who broke the law, and she had never felt more protected. He was slow. He was aching. He was desperate. And as he finally made them one, she arched against him, not in fear, but in a mutual, desperate, and complete surrender. After, they lay tangled, the city lights a distant, blurry backdrop. The silence in the room was thick, sated. Lena was propped on her elbow, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart. He was on his back, his arm over his eyes, as if he couldn't face what had just happened. He spoke first, his voice gravelly, raw. "I kill. Lena." She didn't flinch. "I have done things. I do things every week. Things that you shouldn't forgive. I am not a good man." She traced the line of his collarbone, her touch light. "You saved me." He turned his head on the pillow, his eyes finding hers in the dark. They were filled with a darkness she had never seen. "That doesn't wipe the slate clean." "I don't need a clean slate," she whispered, leaning in to kiss his shoulder. "I just need you." A phone buzzed, not a ring, but a harsh, violent vibration on the nightstand. The moment was shattered. Dominic was sitting up before the second buzz, his entire body tensing. The lever gone. The boss returned. He snatched the phone. "What?" Lena sat up, pulling the sheet over her. His face went white, then it went dark, a cold, lethal fury. "Say that again." He was out of bed, not bothering with the sheet, pulling his pants on, his movements economical and violent. "Where?" he snarled into the phone. "How long ago?" "I don't care what he wants. He's not just sloppy. He's dead." He hung up, his hand clenching the phone. "Dominic, what is it? What's wrong?" "It's Travis." He was pulling a black t-shirt over his head, his back to her. "He finally made his move. What did he do?" Dominic turned, and his face was a mask of cold, controlled rage. "He took Marla. He was waiting. He must have seen her as the weak link. He left a message with Sal. He wants a trade. He didn't have to say it." Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "Her," she whispered. "For me. You're staying here," he commanded, strapping a holster to his shoulder, a gun appearing in his hand. "Sal is already moving. My men are on the way. I'm locking this entire building down. You are not to move." "No." The word was quiet. He stopped, his hand on a box of ammunition. "This is not a discussion, Lena." "No." She was out of the bed, the sheet wrapped around her, her feet planted on the floor. "You don't get it. This isn't your fight. It's mine. He's my monster. This is my fault. He has her because of me. He will kill you. And he will kill her. This is not a game." "And what do you think he'll do if I hide?" she shot back, her voice rising, shaking with a new kind of fury. "He'll always have this. He'll always know I was afraid, that he could use someone else to make me cower, that I'm still that woman in his apartment." She dropped the sheet. She stood bare before him, not as a victim, not as a lover, but as a warrior. Her eyes were blazing, her body trembling, but not with fear, with rage. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being erased. He wants to see me, he'll see me." She looked him dead in the eye. "I won't be the woman who hides anymore." Dominic stared at her for a long, silent moment. The fury on his face was warring with something else, a fierce, burning pride. He nodded, once. "Get dressed," he said, his voice like gravel, "and do exactly what I say." The warehouse was on the south side of the river, in a part of Graybridge that had been forgotten by the city's restoration. It was a metal skeleton, a vast, cold box smelling of rust, river water and old oil. The ride over had been silent. Not a tense silence, but a focused one. Lena was dressed in simple, dark clothes, her hair pulled back, her face pale but set. She wore a slimline, bulletproof vest under her jacket, a non-negotiable command from Dominic. It felt foreign, a hard, cold shell against her skin, but it also felt like a promise. Dominic sat beside her in the back of the black sedan, his presence a physical weight. He was not the lover from hours before. He was the man who ran this city. He was armed, his movements economical, his face a mask of lethal calm. Sal drove, with Marla, rescued from a secondary location by Dominic's men just an hour ago, in the passenger seat. Her face was a patchwork of bruises. Her lips split, but her eyes, when she'd met Lena's, were not apologetic. They were furious. "They're not professionals," Marla had said, her voice raspy. "They're just stupid Travis." "He's a talker. He thinks he's a player. He's going to get everyone killed." Dominic's men. 3 other cars had fanned out, creating a perimeter a full mile before the warehouse. They were not going in blind. "He wants you to walk in alone," Dominic said, his voice a low rumble, cutting the silence as they pulled to a stop in the shadow of a neighboring, derelict building. "He thinks he's smart. He's not. He's bait." "Bait for what?" Lena asked. "The Salatis. He thinks he's handing you over to them to get back in their good graces. He doesn't know the Salatis are just here to clean up the mess, and he's the last piece. So, they'll kill him too," Lena said. It wasn't a question. "They'll kill you both." He turned to her, his eyes capturing hers in the darkness. "You don't have to do this. I can send Marla in, wearing your coat. I can end this in 10 seconds. Lena thought of the woman in the blue dress. She thought of the woman who had hidden in a bathtub. She thought of the fear, a cold, constant companion that had defined her for 2 years. "No," she met his gaze, her own unwavering. "I am done hiding. I want to see his face. I want him to see mine." Dominic's gaze softened. Just for a second, that fierce, burning pride was back. Sal will be on your 6. I'll be on your 5. They'll have rifles on every exit. You will stay behind me. You will not speak unless I tell you. And the second I say down, you go to the ground. Do you understand me?" "I understand," she said, "but I'm speaking to him." Before he could argue, she opened the door. The warehouse was a cavern. A few harsh floodlights, powered by a buzzing generator, cast a pool of dirty yellow light in the center of the vast, concrete floor. Travis was there, standing beside a rusted pillar, and he was, just as Marla said, a talker. He was smug. His sandy hair was perfectly coiffed, his expensive overcoat unbuttoned, his hands in his pockets. He looked like a man who had just closed a successful, if hostile, merger. Beside him, Marla's replacement, a different woman, was tied to a chair. She looked unconscious. "Lena, baby!" Travis called out, his voice echoing in the huge space. He spread his arms wide. "I knew you'd come. I knew you'd miss me. Did you get bored with your new friend?" His gaze slid past her, into the darkness where he knew Dominic must be. "You can come out, Varelli. I'm not here for you. This is a domestic dispute. Just send her over. Send me my property and we can all go home." Property. The word. His voice. The casual arrogance. Lena had expected to be terrified. She had expected to freeze. She felt nothing. Just a cold, sharp, clarifying anger. "Stay here," Dominic growled, his hand on her arm. Lena shook her head. She pulled her arm from his grasp and stepped forward, out of the shadow and into the light. She stopped about 20 feet from him. "Hello? Travis?" she said. Her voice didn't shake. It was clear, and it was cold, and it carried in the silence. Travis's smile faltered. This was not the woman he knew. The woman he knew would be crying. She would be begging. "Lena," he said, trying to regain the condescending tone. "Stop this. It's unbecoming. Come here. We can talk about this. I'll even forgive you." "Forgive me?" Lena took another step. She could see the confusion in his eyes, the first flicker of fear, his fear. It was intoxicating. "You're not here to forgive me, Travis," she said, her voice resonating with a strength she didn't know she had. "You're here because you're a coward. You're a thief who was too stupid to even cover his own tracks. You're a lapdog." "Shut up, Lena," he hissed, his face darkening. "No, I'm done shutting up. I'm done being nice. You didn't love me. You used me. You used my name for your fake charities. You used my talent to make your lies look pretty. You used my body to feel powerful. But you're not powerful, Travis. You're just a pathetic, empty little man who is terrified of being found out. I gave you everything," he roared, finally losing his composure, his face turning a blotchy red. "You were nothing. You were a hobbyist. I made you. I own you." "You don't own me," Lena whispered, and the whisper was louder than his shout. "You didn't make me. You erased me. Or you tried to." She took one last step, so she was close enough for him to see her eyes, to see that there were no more tears. "You failed," she said. That was what broke him. Not the accusations, not the anger, the pity in her voice, the finality. He lunged. He didn't have a gun. He was a coward, after all. He lunged with his hands, his face contorted in a mask of pure, childish rage. His hands outstretched to go around her throat. A sound, a deafening crack, echoed through the warehouse. Travis screamed, a high-pitched animal sound, and fell backward, clutching his ankle. Dominic stepped out of the shadows, his gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. He hadn't hit Travis. He had hit the concrete floor 1 inch from his foot, and a chip of shrapnel had torn through Travis's expensive $2,000 leather shoe. "My ankle!" Travis shrieked, clutching it. You shot me!" "You moved," Dominic said, his voice flat, and then the world exploded. It wasn't a single shot. It was the sudden, deafening thwack, thwack, thwack of automatic gunfire from the catwalks above. The floodlights shattered, plunging the center of the warehouse into almost total darkness, illuminated only by the frantic, terrifying flashes of muzzle fire. The Salatis, they weren't waiting. They were cleaning house. "Down!" Dominic roared. He didn't wait for her. He hit her. He tackled her, a solid 200-pound weight, driving her to the concrete floor, his body covering hers completely. The air was knocked from her lungs, her face pressed into the cold, oily floor. Bullets were chewing the air where they had just been standing. "Crawl!" he yelled in her ear, the sound barely audible over the din. "To the pillar! Now!" He didn't let her go. He pushed her, his body a living shield, moving with her as they scrambled the 10 feet to the wide concrete pillar Travis had been leaning against. Sal and his men returned fire. The sound was different. Theirs were controlled. Single shots. The Salatis were panicked, spraying bursts. Dominic shoved her behind the pillar, his body pressed against hers, his gun up, firing back into the darkness. "Sal, right flank! 2 on the catwalk!" Lena's heart was a drum against her ribs. She was pinned between the cold concrete and the hot, solid, terrifying reality of Dominic. He was a warrior. He was calm. He was breathing, a Salati gunman, young, stupid, and desperate, leaned too far out from a stack of rusted barrels not 50 feet away. Dominic's gun barked twice. The man crumpled. Lena didn't look away. "Stay down," Dominic ordered, his voice tight. He was reloading, a fluid, practiced motion, and in that half-second of vulnerability, a second gunman, hidden behind an old piece of machinery, saw his opening. Lena saw him first, a flicker of movement, a glint of metal. "Dominic!" she screamed, her voice tearing. Dominic didn't have time to turn. He just reacted. He shoved her. He shoved her so hard her head cracked against the concrete, and he twisted his own body, taking the impact. She felt it, a heavy, wet thud. It wasn't loud. It was just final. Dominic grunted, a sharp, choked-off sound. His body went rigid against hers. He stumbled, but he didn't fall. He raised his gun, his arm shaking, and fired 3 times, not at the gunman, but at a heavy chain hanging from a small crane above him. The chain snapped. A ton of rusted engine parts, held in a cargo net, crashed down, crushing the gunman and the machinery he was hiding behind. And then, silence. The silence was heavier, more terrifying than the gunfire. "Sal," Dominic called out, his voice a strained rasp. "Clear, boss!" Sal's voice echoed from the darkness. 2 down, 3 ran. They're gone. "Travis? Zip-tied, boss. He's crying." "Marla's replacement? She's fine," a woman's voice. Marla's called out. "They just used a damn chloroform rag. She's got a headache, but she's alive. I'm good." The generator for the main lights kicked back in. The warehouse flooded with light. It was a scene of chaos, but it was over. Lena was still on the ground. Dominic was leaning heavily against the pillar, his left hand pressed to his right shoulder. His gun was still in his hand, but it was pointing at the floor. "Dominic," she whispered. She scrambled to her feet. He was pale. His face, usually so controlled, was a mask of pain. His black shirt was turning blacker. It was soaked. He looked down at his shoulder, at the blood seeping between his fingers, and then he looked at her. "You're okay," he said. It wasn't a question. You're... She couldn't say it. She ignored Sal, who was hauling a sobbing Travis to his feet. She ignored Marla, who was helping the other woman. She went to him. "It's just a..." He grunted, trying to straighten, but a wave of dizziness hit him, and he slammed his back against the pillar. "It's just a scratch. Let me see." Her hands were shaking, but she was in control. She grabbed his arm, the one not holding the gun. "Dominic, let me see." He let the gun clatter to the floor. She ripped the tactical shirt. The blood was a lot. It was a dark, pulsing wave. "Sal, the kit, now!" She screamed. She pressed her hands, both of her hands, against the wound. It was high, in the thick muscle of his shoulder. The bullet had gone clean through. Bad, so very, very bad, but not lethal. Not if she stopped the bleeding. He hissed, his body tensing under her touch, but he didn't pull away. He was watching her, his eyes clouded with pain, full of a strange, raw vulnerability she had never seen. "I thought," he whispered, his voice so low she had to lean in, "I thought I'd never be worth saving." He wasn't talking about the bullet. He was talking about Alara. He was talking about that night, 6 years ago. He had taken a bullet for her, for Lena. And in his mind, he had finally atoned. Lena's eyes filled with hot, sudden tears. They streamed down her face, but her hands on his shoulder never wavered. "Shh," she whispered, her voice breaking. She leaned in, past the blood, past the pain, and she pressed her lips to his forehead. It was a kiss, not of passion, but of reverence, a blessing. "You saved me," she whispered against his skin, her tears anointing him. "You saved me from the moment you opened that car door." She pulled back, her eyes fierce and bright, locking with his. "Now, let me save you." He didn't speak. He just held her gaze, and in the ruins of the warehouse, surrounded by his men and his enemies, Dominic Varelli, for the first time in 6 years, let go. The ride back was different. Marla and Sal were in a different car. Travis was gone, in a van, headed to a location Lena didn't want to know about. It was just her and Dominic. He was in the back, his shoulder tightly bandaged, his arm in a makeshift sling. He'd taken something for the pain, but his eyes were clear. He hadn't spoken. He took out his phone. He dialed, "Sal, change of plans. Get me Agent Kincaid." "Yes, the one from the task force. The Fed." "No, you're not listening to me. Call him. Tell him I have a gift." Lena stared at him. Agent Kincaid was the man the papers called the Bulldog, the one who had been trying to build a case against the Salatis and the Varellis for 3 years. "Tell him," Dominic continued, his voice low, "that I am dropping off a package, Travis Melling, and with him, a hard drive, the full ledgers, all of the Salati charity accounts, everything." He paused, and he looked at Lena. "Tell him. It's an anonymous tip from a concerned citizen." He hung up. Lena's heart was in her throat. "Dominic, you... What?" "The Salatis are finished," he said, his voice weary. "They broke the code. They involved a civilian. They almost got you killed. The old way. My way. It's not clean. It would just make more ghosts." He looked at her, his eyes full of a new, terrifying and beautiful clarity. "This is your way. This is the right way." He had just in one phone call handed over the keys to his entire rival's kingdom to the federal government. He had exposed them, and in doing so, had exposed a part of his own world. They'll come for you, too," she whispered. "Let them try," he said. "I've been running from ghosts for 6 years. I'm done running." He reached out, his good hand finding hers, his calloused fingers lacing with her own. "I'm done." The penthouse, with its glass walls and city spire views, had been a fortress. The estate, nestled in the rolling, wooded hills 40 minutes outside of Graybridge, was a sanctuary. It had been 6 weeks. 6 weeks since the night in the warehouse, since the sound of gunfire and the smell of rust and blood. 6 weeks, and the deep, angry purple of Dominic's wound had faded to a puckered silver scar that joined the others on his body. They had left the penthouse the day after he was released from Dr. Azarov's care. The estate was a place from his childhood, a sprawling stone house with more fireplaces than bedrooms, surrounded by 100 acres of oak and pine. It smelled like damp earth, old wood, and, since Lena had arrived, fresh coffee. Dominic's recovery was steady, but his restlessness was a new challenge. He was a man built of motion and control, being forced to sit. His arm in a sling for the first 3 weeks was a special kind of torture. Lena had stayed. She'd not been a nurse. She'd been a presence, a calm, steady anchor in his frustration. And as he healed, she bloomed. The haunted, gaunt woman from the streets was gone. In her place was a woman who was reclaiming her own light. The paleness had been replaced by a warmth from walking the estate's trails. Her hair, which she'd cut to her shoulders in a simple, unstyled wave, was thicker, shinier. She was still slender, but she moved with a purpose that had been absent. She was not just stronger, she was more radiant, as if she were finally, after years, making room for herself. She had started a project twice a week. Sal would drive her into the city, to a small community center in a part of town that didn't have fundraisers. She'd set up a simple studio in a borrowed room with a few donated cameras and her old laptop. She started photography therapy sessions. She called it the Visibility Project. It was for women who had, in one way or another, been erased, women who had fled abusive homes, women who had lost themselves in bad relationships, women who, like her, were afraid they'd forgotten who they were. She taught them to use the camera, not to just take photos, but to see, to be seen. Dominic had funded it, of course, through 3 different anonymous shell corporations, but the work, the heart, the fight, that was all Lena. He was sitting in the library one evening, the sky a deep, bruised purple outside the tall windows. His shoulder ached with the coming rain. He was looking at a ledger, but he wasn't reading it. He was watching her. She was curled on the opposite couch, sketching in a notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. My father, Dominic said, his voice quiet, breaking the comfortable silence. Lena's head came up, her pencil poised. My father, he said again. He never wanted this for me. He wanted me to be a lawyer, something clean. He built this. He motioned around the room. All of this. From nothing. From his father's butcher shop. He built an empire, and he wanted his son to be a prince, not a thug. Lena just watched him, her gaze open, patient. She didn't speak. She just listened. When he died, the Salatis, they saw an opening. I was 24. I was arrogant. I thought I could run it all. The clean and the other. I thought I could control it. He looked down at his hands. Alara. She loved the prince. She loved the man who went to fundraisers and quoted poetry. He shook his head. A small, bitter motion. She didn't know the thug. Not really. I never let her see it. He finally looked at her, his eyes raw with a confession he'd held for 6 years. When she died, I let the prince die with her. I became what they made me, what I thought I had to be. I leaned into it. The violence, the control. I thought that if I was hard enough, if I was empty enough, nothing could ever touch me again. He took a long, shuddering breath. I was wrong. I was just a ghost. Just like you said, a ghost in a $3,000 suit. Lena uncurled herself from the couch. She came and sat beside him, not on the far cushion, but right next to him, her thigh pressing against his. She didn't say, "It's okay." She didn't say, "You're forgiven." She just took his hand, his larger, scarred, violent hand, and laced her fingers with his. She held it. She held his hand, his confession, his past, and she didn't flinch. "I'm here," she whispered. And that was all he needed. They rebuilt, not on the shattered, passionate ruins of the penthouse, but on the solid, quiet ground of the estate. The relationship was one of honesty, one of choice. He learned to let go of the guilt, to understand that Alara's death was a tragedy he'd endured, not one he had authored. He learned that Lena was not a ghost he was saving, but a woman who was saving him, one quiet evening at a time, and Lena let go of her fear. She no longer slept with a nightlight. She no longer flinched at sudden movements. She walked with her head up. She knew who Dominic was. She'd seen the darkness in him, the capacity for violence, the coldness. But she had also seen the man who had slept in a chair, the man who had taken a bullet for her, the man who had handed his mortal enemies to the FBI because it was her way. She was not afraid of him. She had never been safer. 3 months after the warehouse, Lena got her first gallery feature. It was a small, independent gallery downtown, the kind of place Travis would have sneered at. The walls were brick. The floors were scuffed wood. It was packed. The show was titled Survivors in Silence. It was her work. The work she had started in the penthouse, and the work she had done at the center. It was a series of portraits. They were not photos of victims. They were not sad or broken. They were honest. A woman with a faded bruise on her cheek, her eyes not downcast, but staring, defiant, into the lens. An older woman, her hands gnarled, holding a single key, a look of profound, quiet victory on her face. A portrait of Marla, her split lip healed, her gaze sharp and unapologetic, and, in the center, a self-portrait. It was just her, from the shoulders up, in a simple black t-shirt, but it was the woman he had met. It was the woman who had run barefoot. It was the woman who had cried in a bathtub. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, her hair a mess. But she was not looking away. She was staring at the viewer. She was saying, "I see you." Dominic stood in the back, near the door. He was a shadow in a dark coat, his presence overlooked by the small, artsy crowd. He was not there as Dominic Varelli, the boss. He was just a man. He watched her. She was surrounded, people shaking her hand, critics asking questions. She was glowing. She was articulate. He realized, the most powerful person in the room. His chest felt tight. It was a feeling he wasn't used to. It wasn't possession, it was pride, a fierce, burning pride that was so profound it almost brought him to his knees. She was seen, she was visible, and she was magnificent. That night, they drove back to the estate. The high of the gallery had faded into a comfortable, quiet exhaustion. A storm had broken, the one that had been threatening all day. Rain lashed the windows, the wind howling through the old oaks. Lena was standing by the tall library window, the same one where he had confessed his past. She was in a soft cashmere robe, her silhouette framed against the wild, dark blue of the storm. She was just watching the rain, a small, content smile on her face. Dominic came up behind her. He didn't speak. He just stood there, absorbing the sight of her, the peace she brought to his chaotic world. He slid his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He was warm, solid, home. She leaned her head back against his shoulder. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of her, clean and fresh, like the rain itself. He pressed his lips to her temple. "Undress and breathe," he whispered, the words a low, gravelly vibration against her skin. She didn't tense. She didn't stiffen. She didn't remember the fear. She turned in his arms. She turned to face him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, right over his heart. She looked up at him, her eyes, clear and bright, full of a love so steady it humbled him. "This time," she said, her voice soft, but impossibly strong, "I'm not scared." His breath hitched. He had said the words that first night to offer her a moment of survival. She had just given them back to him as a promise of forever. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, claiming kiss of the penthouse. It was not the passionate, public kiss of the terrace. This was a kiss of choice. It was slow. It was deep. It was forever. His lips were soft, patient. He was not demanding. He was asking, and she was answering. Her mouth opened under his, a soft, yielding sigh. Her hands moved from his chest to his neck, her fingers tangling in the hair at his nape, pulling him closer. His hands, those scarred, strong hands, slid from her waist, one moving up to cup her jaw, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek, the other sliding down. His palm splayed over the small of her back. He kissed her until the world outside, the rain, the storm, the past, all of it faded to a dull roar. There was only the library, the fire crackling in the hearth, and the two of them, finally in the same, safe place. Passion rose again, but it was different. It was not the desperate, frantic heat of two broken people colliding in the dark. It was the slow, steady, radiant warmth of a fire that had been carefully, patiently built. It was the heat of safety. It was the deep, unshakable promise of a love that had been tested, that had seen the worst of them both and had not, for 1 second, looked away. It was late, much later, when Dominic, unable to sleep, found himself in his study. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. On his desk was a single, pristine white envelope. It was not from his world, it was from theirs. The logo of the United States Department of Justice was in the corner. Sal had left it for him. It had arrived that afternoon. He picked it up. It felt heavy. Though it was only a single page, he slid it open with a letter opener, the one that had belonged to his father. The letter was brief, clinical official. It informed him, as a person of interest who had provided ancillary information, that the case against Mr. Travis Melling had been concluded, a plea bargain. In the face of the overwhelming evidence, the ledgers, the offshore accounts, the fraud, and his cooperation against the now decimated Salati family, Travis Melling was facing life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 35 years. Dominic read the words, 35 years, life. He folded the letter. He held it in his hand. This was the end of it. The final, legal, clean end to the nightmare that had brought Lena to his car. He walked to the fireplace. The embers from their earlier fire were still glowing. He did not keep the letter. He did not file it. He did not need a trophy of his victory or a reminder of her pain. He dropped the letter onto the glowing coals. He watched as the edges curled, turned black, and the official, typed words of the government dissolved into flame. He watched until it was nothing but gray ash. He was burning the past. He was burning the ghost of Travis. He was burning the last hold that world had on her, on them. He turned and walked out of the study. He walked down the hall, the old wooden floors silent beneath his bare feet. He walked back into the bedroom. The lights were low, just a single lamp glowing on the nightstand. The bed was turned down, and Lena was waiting. She was propped up on the pillows, a book in her lap, her eyes soft as she watched him enter. She said nothing. She just smiled, a small, simple, knowing smile. He shed his robe and slid into the bed beside her, the clean, cool sheets a comfort. He didn't speak. He just wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, his face in her hair. She set her book aside. She turned into his embrace, her hand coming to rest on his chest, over his heart. Their future was unwritten. It was unknown. His world was still his world, and hers was just beginning. But it was theirs, and for the first time in a very long time. Dominic Varelli, holding the only thing that had ever truly been worth saving, felt at peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope you enjoyed the journey with Lena and Dominic. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please drop a comment and say hello. For more stories just like this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories. And finally, what did you think? Let me know your thoughts on the story in English. Your feedback means everything. Until next time.